Then there's also a reference to Rahab in Matthew 1, 4 through 6. And also, I'm going to give you a little bit of that Matthew reference so you'll know what it is. Yeah, the reference is when Matthew lists from the very beginning the long line that ends up with Jesus the Christ. And it's an important mark of all of those that came before him and the relationship of each one of them to the next generation. Joshua 2, 1 through 24, Joshua 6, 22 through 25, and I'm in Matthew 1, 4 through 6. And I'm going to read it to you. And it is part of the lineage, but I'm going to start with the bottom of 4, where it says, Nashun begot Sami. I know it's spelled like Salmon, but it's really Sami. Begot Boaz. You remember Boaz? Okay. And Boaz begot Rahab. Rahab is who we're talking about. And Boaz, and then the next Obed by Ruth, and then Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot who? David. King David. Okay, so she's right in that lineage right there. So that's extraordinary, extraordinarily important, okay? All right, and then let me go a little bit further. It's also a reference in Hebrew 11:31. This is the listing, the long list of all of those that have been faithful down through the line. Turn to it, it's 11:31, so we can look at it. Hebrew 11:31. It's really the whole series of the faithful. You know, it starts out with now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And then he began, by faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. And it goes all the way down until we get to the 31st verse. And it says this. It says, by faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, when she had received the spies with peace. And then it goes on, and what more shall I say, for time would fail me. And he begins to list all the others. So she is in that long line of those who through faith absolutely made incredible decisions and stood in such a grounding of faith that it changed the course of history. Changed the course of history, okay? Because through that line, many had lost their loved ones. They had paid tremendous prices to keep the faith. And listed there was Rahab the harlot, who by faith did not perish when the walls of Jericho were crushed by those who did not believe. Okay? She had received the spies in peace, and she kept her promise as they did theirs. And then again, Rahab is recognized in James 2 and 25. And I'll give you the quote. It says, likewise, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers? Wow. And sent them out another way? For the body without the spirit is dead. So faith without works is dead also. That's a constant sentiment with James. He's always looking. If there's faith and not works, then there's not faith. Okay. If we have faith, then what follows must be works. Because you can't keep faith isolated from action. And works is the action of what you believe, what you see, what your faith is. And so he's remarking on how in this lineage that faith, the harlot Rahab, saw beyond what was seeable at the time, grabbed on to the promise of God whom she did not yet know, okay, and believed for a better day, a better season, a better life. Okay? All right. And then there's another reference, and I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with a gentleman by the name of Josephus. He is a historian. He was also a priest. He was also in the military. He was a military leader until he realized he could give it up because he was not going to get anywhere against the Roman Empire. At that point, he gave up his military leadership, and he became totally a historian and was recognized and accepted by Rome in that capacity and only that capacity. And in that capacity, he remarked on this. He said, Rahab, because of her work and faith, to trust Joshua's men, she should no longer be called the harlot. She's always been called the harlot. But Josephus saw it differently and said that because of the evidence of her faithfulness, because she saved her family, she should no longer be called the harlot, but should be recognized for the salvation and protection of her family and how God so orchestrated her to be a part of the line of David and ultimately the line of Jesus. Very important. Okay? Before we get into the scriptures themselves and the dialogue between the spies and Rahab, because this is nothing unless we get in that dialogue, it struck me, and I want to see if you think the same way. Now, we spent quite a bit of time with Lydia. I want you to think about this. Lydia and with Rahab, both of these women, number one, owned their own homes. Number two, both were self-supporting. Both took care of their families. Both had an understanding of God that was lost in the environment where they lived. Both, seeing to the power of destruction of war, decided to follow a path and a God they did not yet know the name of. Both became powerful supporters of Yahweh, and in New Testament times of the powerful, healing, kind witness to the poor that Jesus' ministry encompassed. For women to stand out at the risk of their lives in both situations, it took tremendous courage. It took great bravery. It took strong belief or faith in what they saw as possible for themselves and their families. They were both keen negotiators. Think about that. Had to be keen negotiators. And they were able to enter into life-saving contracts with the Jews of their time. Neither one of them were Jewish. Exemplary capacity for leadership and skill in making choices to liberate their families and embrace God until true transformation could be established in their lives and the lives of their families. I mean, these two women put it on the line. They gave everything. They gave everything. And they believed that the God that they'd heard about was anywhere close to what they said about God, then they had a chance for total transformation and a life worth living. Now, let's look at Rahab's in particular, because we've already spent quite a bit of time on Lydia, to save her family. The definition of Rahab is broad. Now, there are always critics that make broad into a nasty kind of thing, like the woman is a broad. But that's not the context of her name at all. It means broad like wide, expansive, spacious. In other words, a broad space she gave to the spies. She brought them into her space, into her inn, and she took care of them in her inn, believing that giving them the space would open the door for the salvation and the courageous bravery of her family to become in that lineage, at least to be saved in the battle against Jericho. Okay? And it also means opening oneself in a more metaphorical way, making a wide expanse, but not leaving it that, wide-hearted person of faith. Wide-hearted, the expansion of the heart. Okay? Very wide, that she could believe and be secure in what was told her would happen to her and her family. Okay, any questions? All right, let's actually get into a little bit of scripture. Now, I know it's hard sometimes to hang with reading scriptures, but we sort of need to here. I want to go to Joshua, if everybody can find Joshua. You got a Bible in the pew if you don't have one with you. Joshua should be after the Judges, although Ruth is, so let me find myself Joshua. Kings. I should have marked it. Somebody find it for me really quick. Look at Joshua. I want to find Joshua, the second chapter. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Everybody look at Joshua, the second chapter. And this is the beginning of it. Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out 2 men from Acacia Grove. Okay, you read with me, to spy secretly, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. Jericho was a walled city, and I don't mean barely walled, I mean 13 to 15 feet high and extraordinarily 8 to 10 feet thick. That's how protected Jericho was. Okay. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men have come here tonight. Now, who did they tell? The king of Jericho. So the moment the spies entered Jericho, someone snitched. Someone went directly to the king and not only told them that they're here, the children of Israel, to search out the country, but so the king of Jericho sent to, where'd he send to? Rahab. He went straight to Rahab. So they didn't only say that the spies were in there, they said where they were, which meant they told the king that these spies were hiding in the house or the inn of Rahab. That's what happened, okay? And it went on and said, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country, okay? And then it goes on. Then the woman took the 2 and hid them. So she said, yes, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they were from. And it happened, as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I don't know. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them, or may overtake them. So what is she doing? She's diverting where they are. She's sending them on a wild goose chase. Okay? And the gates have already been closed. Okay? But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with stalks of flax. These were big, tall stalks, and they were furry on the end. And she put all of that over them and a covering, and then put all the stalks on top. which she had laid in order on the roof, so that even if they searched her place, they would not think of them being under all of that flax. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan, to the fords, and as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now before they lay down, she came up to them. Wise decision. Came at the right time. She had just saved their lives. Okay? So she says this to them. I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Jordan, of the Red Sea. Remember, they crossed through the Red Sea again for you when you came out of Egypt. That was with Moses, sorry. And what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. They had a reputation. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above. Now look at what she's confessing. And earth beneath. Now, therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you will also show me kindness to my father's house and give me a true token. A true token means a pledge of faith. That's what the words mean, pledge of truth. Pledge of truth. Spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, not just the people, but their possessions. Spare it all, and deliver our lives from death. So listen to the men. They're all cagey. So the men answered her, our lives for yours, if none of you tell this business of ours. You can't say a word about what you know. And it shall be when the Lord has given us the land that we will deal kindly and truly with you. Then she let them down by a rope through the window. Remember, she's on the outside, okay, of the wall. Her place is on the outside of the wall, so the window goes outside of the actual wall. She's on the top of the wall, and so the window, as you climb out the window, goes down to the ground, okay? All right. So we will deal kindly with you. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. She dwelt on the wall. And she had to have some money to have a house all by herself, an inn on the wall, on the outside, where nobody could see what she was doing, period. That took some money. Like Lydia, she had a house. No one was exactly sure how she had it except making of the purple, but she had money. Same here. Now get to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days. This is a very precise woman. Until the pursuers have returned. Afterward, you may go your way. So the men said to her, because they're going back and forth with this agreement. They're making a deal here. So the men said to her, we will be blameless of this oath of yours, which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window, through which you let us down. And unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your father's household to your own home, everyone must be in this one place. Now, scarlet is interesting because scarlet is sometimes attached to the robe of Christ that was put on Jesus as he was taken to be crucified. But the word means royalty and redemption. And it's an odd word because it has a complex mix of sin and impurity and deep stain but simultaneously it also represents royalty, wealth, and sacrificial blood, the blood of Christ. Oh, hallelujah. And it was this that Rahab understood. So it's like a symbol of one coming to God and then understanding the depth of who God is. And as you begin to understand the depth of who God is, you're transformed into the fullness of the scarlet, which is royalty. So you might have come not knowing who you are and having done many things to survive, as all humans do. But when you come fully into the scarlet, the type of capacity of wealth, the type of godliness, the revelation of who God is in your life, there's a transformation from one state into the next. Okay? All right. So anyway, all right, let me see here. Where was I? So the men said, we will be blameless of this oath of yours which you have made. Unless we come into the land, you bind this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless all the people of your family are there, we can't do anything. Okay? So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, their blood is on their head. We cannot protect them out there. They must be in the house, okay? And whoever is with you in the house, his blood should be on our head. What that means, if anybody breaks what we have established, comes into your house and harms anyone, that's on us, and we will make restitution. Now, how you make restitution for a human life? So what they would have done is give them gold or something else for the restitution, okay? So that was the deal making. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath which you made us swear. And then she said, according to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord right then and there in the window. Okay. They went to the mountain. What they went to, where they went back to Joshua to tell Joshua everything. I'm going to read a little bit of that, and then I'm going to move on. And they said to Joshua, truly the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands, for indeed all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us. So what did that do? That gave them the courage to go and destroy the city. Now, if you remember, and I won't go into all of it, they got to the city, and Joshua had given them strict orders. And they had to cross through the river to get there. And the river had stopped, and they put stones out as a monument. But when they got to Jericho, they did this. They marched once a day for 6 days around the city. No one said a word. No trumpets blew. Nothing. They walked in silence. Can you imagine? You see a whole tribe of people walking around your city, and they're not saying anything. And you know what they've already been able to accomplish. It had to strike fear in the hearts of those that were in Jericho. It had to have them worried at night. It had to be checking all the gates into the city. I mean, it was not a comfortable position to put them in, okay? And then finally they get to the 7th day. And they bore the ark of the testimony in front of them, and they began to walk on the 7th day. And they walked around 7 times this time. Not once, 7 times. And then, and this is in chapter 6 if you're looking. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets, 6 and 4, of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all of the people shall shout with a great shout. then the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up every man straight before him. That's pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. But it's unity, it's obedience, it is the realization of what sound can do to a stone wall. All of those factors were in it. All right. And so Joshua set it all in motion. They rose early, and they did exactly what Joshua had told them to do. And it said, now the city, and I'm turning over to verse 17, shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction, it and all who are in it. Listen to what Joshua has picked up from his men. Only Rahab, the harlot, shall live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And they did exactly what they said. So Joshua had said to the two men, this is in 22, verse 22, had spied out the country, go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her. And the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, her sisters, and all that she had. So they brought out all her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the city in its entirety. Quite a story. All right. So, yes. I think that's a good question. What do you think made them hide her? Now think about it. She's seen destruction. She's seen everything they've done. She knows that there's no chance. She knows she's harboring them when she could have exposed them and they die right then and there, the spies. But she knows ultimately Joshua and his army are coming. She has, because you think, I said this I think before, but I've learned in Africa, we can start out in Accra, 2.5 days journey from where we go. And before we arrive, everybody knows where we've been and how we're coming and where we are every part of the way. Word of mouth. And it's amazing. Because when we first went, there weren't a whole lot of buses that traveled the road. And yet they still knew. Everybody knew where we were. Because we were foreigners in their land. You always keep a watchful eye on foreigners until you know them. You don't trust until you know them. Okay? So this is how I think she'd heard all the stories. She knew if they came to Jericho, everyone would be killed, destroyed, walls torn down, everything would go. Because this had been the pattern. She'd heard of the pattern. Word had, because people came into the city to do business, and then they left. So they knew the power of Joshua and his army. They knew the power of the God that Joshua served. So she knew they were doomed, unless she could come up with a way to save her family. Smart woman. Okay? Very smart. So she knew if she protected them, there would be an obligation built into that protection, that in turn she would be protected. Okay? Any other questions about that?
She really had to trust him.
Say it again?
She really had to trust him.
Oh, Lord, yes. Oh, Lord, yes. And they had to trust her. And that was the agreement. You don't expose us, we won't expose you. That's trust.
Was she a part of God's plan? Was she a specific person for a specific time? Because it took some wisdom for her to be able to understand where she fit in that piece. As far as protecting them and they protecting her, them trusting her, she trusting them.
Well, I think in God's way, yes. Was she aware of that then? No. She knew she had to save her family, and she was smart enough and wise enough to know that if she traded and spoke properly and made a deal, they would honor it. Because they knew they could have lost their lives. Unless y'all have another idea. You know. So, and once she made that decision, it says she was outside of the gates of the camp of Israel for a season. So she was separated from them for a season until they finally allowed her to enter the Israel camp because they now trusted her. And they were now willing to accept her, even though she was a Canaanite. Because that's who she was. She was a Canaanite. And Canaanites were enemies of the Jews. Okay? All right. Any other questions? Okay. So anyway, let me see. I was thinking about some things that I think what are important still. No more questions about this. You understand the story of Rahab. You understand the power in which God ordained to use her. And you understand that in freeing her family and in keeping her word, she married a guy by the name of Salmon, and she bore Boaz. And Boaz, you check it on down, came to David, and David came on down to Jesus. So she was in the line of the Christ all the way through. Amazing. 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 Okay. All right. Now, she's one of only 4 women mentioned in the family tree of Jesus. One of 4. But also the mother of Boaz, who was the husband of Ruth, and the great-great-grandmother of King David. So the author of Hebrews speaks of her, as I said before, as a shining example of faith. So she moved from a position of faithfulness in terms of her family to faithfulness to this God who was now being revealed to her in a way she had never understood before. And in that revelation, she came to a place in her own life to understand that this God, although capturing many territories at the same time, was a God one could trust. God kept the word. If God gave a word, God kept that word. And so this was an opening to her to be transformed into that God line, but also into a relationship with Almighty God, Yahweh, to the place that her whole life was changed beautifully so that she could become an example of God's faithfulness to those that choose to be faithful to him. Okay? All right. Any other questions? No questions?
I got a comment.
All right.
Just looking at, you said, Rahab, they keep the title of the harlot on the back end of it. But the way that she allowed herself to be a vessel for their movement, for Israel to get in position to do what they need to do, it just lets you see how God, he sees the heart and sees that desire. That's what he honored. Had nothing to do with what man said and wants to continue to hold on to.
That's right.
Many times people be like they're looking for someone to see them for what they are and not for what they have done or what they have been or whatever. Clearly, here it spells it out so clear. And it's beautiful how she used her position
Yeah.
to position them, and in turn, it was just an honoring on both sides. And
Yes.
whatever. And it's so beautiful how then coming down the line here comes Jesus out of her. Only God can do that.
Yes.
But it's wonderful to be able to look at it from the perspective of how God moves. How, like you he says, your ways are not my ways.
Yeah.
You know, the way you see things, not the way I see them.
That's right.
You know, he used her, and she opened herself up to be used to be able to create that, and then therefore look, you know, how
Yeah.
that thing manifested later.
Yeah. Absolutely. God doesn't look at the behavior, God looks at the heart.
Look at the heart.
And we've, yeah, Jonathan,
You know,
oh, I'm sorry,
the
did you have?
way,
No.
Pastor Jay, you good, you done?
Yeah, I'm here, yeah.
I was thinking about the way that Rahab explained God. When she was making this deal
Mm-hmm.
with them, the way she explained, and what Reese had asked, why did she do it? Because, you were saying in Revelation, I think she had an extremely strong experience with God. That God just showed her who he was, and she based her negotiation, her decision, all that based on this experience. Because the way that she describes God, the Lord of the heights and the depths, that comes out of an experience that she had, And certainly she went to say her family, certainly she had heard the history of what Israel had done. But that language, to me, speaks to an experience.
And I think what's also true, she was a very smart woman. She knew in dealing with the spies that where she stood with God in terms of making sure they understood she would not break her promise was extraordinarily important. She was, what's the right word? She could read people. You can't be an innkeeper and not have the capacity, to have discernment. That's what the word I'm looking for, discernment. Because otherwise you wouldn't stay long as an innkeeper. Go ahead, Leon.
One of the things that strikes me in the lineage portion is, the scripture came to me, it says, he watches over his word to perform it. And there were just so many times where the performance of the word was so challenged. And so here we have, since we're talking about Rahab, we see the challenge that was there. And let's say, I look at it like this, the human thought, we're not robots. It's a decision that's made there, but yet the power of God and the Spirit of God, it said he watched over his word to perform it. And so when you look through the lineage, there were just so many opportunities. I would say he watched over his seed. And it's just amazing to me when you go through the lineage and say 14 generations.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then I'll say one more thing, I'll stop, is that you'll see that, we're talking about humanity. In Jesus' lineage, there were people from all walks of life. So it takes away the accusation because the love of God was expressed through all of the different personalities and walks of life. And so it's in the blood.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Yeah. No, that's very important. And when you look at Ruth laying at the feet of Boaz, now he'd already gone to sleep, and she quietly slipped in and laid at his feet. So when he woke, who did he see but Ruth? And his heart was moved. So there's so much intuitive understanding of God's ways, and so a challenge to fully trust. Because very honestly, any of the women that we have mentioned could have been killed for their actions, and it would have been legal. So we have to remember that. So they took a tremendous risk with her own life in order to create an environment where there would be a place broad enough for them to live and for their families to live. That's an amazing, courageous, bold decision to make. Go ahead, Cynthia. You gotta talk louder.
It also shows how amazing God is,
Mhm.
and that, both of these women, Ruth, they was not same nationality.
Mhm.
As
Right.
being a Christian, Noah's,
Well, I think Ruth was a Moabite, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, Rahab wasn't either.
Canaanite.
Right, but God saw, he wanted relationship, when I'm saying he wanted relationship with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I'm saying, and then there was no discrimination. He wanted relationship with them, so he brought them into him,
Mhm.
for them to develop that relationship with him.
Yeah.
So I think that's important, not that God will discriminate, but it's anybody. He brings all of us into one.
Yeah. I think it's amazing when you look at the fact that in leaving their own identity, these women had to leave their own identity and lose their identity into that new thing that God was opening for them. Because the Moabites aren't around still. Neither are the Canaanites still around. And yet, having attached themselves, and I have to say this carefully, but having attached themselves to the long-term belief of the Jews, saved them. Because otherwise they'd been wiped off the face of the earth. Because the tribes were wiped off the face of the earth. So it saved them. And I think even now we have to realize that, we think of Jesus the Christ as Christian. No, he was Jewish. He was Jewish. All he knew were the traditions of the Jews, the ways of the Jews, the word that God had given prophets down from the very beginning of what he desired for his people. And all of the Isaiahs and the Jeremiahs and all the others that wrote, the Ezekiels that wrote, and all the smaller minor prophets, but they weren't minor in what they said, okay? They came to a place of understanding God's heart, and they would get mad as they could get at the people, because the people kept missing it and missing it and missing it and missing it. And, at times they would want to call fire against the people and everything else. Just kill them, Lord. They don't get it. They know the truth. They won't walk in it. They keep going after this God and that God. And get rid of them. But then they would come to their senses and say, oh, this is a compassionate God, a loving God. And it wasn't that things didn't happen at times for correction. But the point long term was that these prophets who were so angry at their people at times, and the kings mostly. They were always mad at the kings because the kings were doing what they wanted to do while they were trying to bring the people into a union with Christ or a union with God. And the thing about it is that the capacity always, when it got close to their last nerve, something God did inside of them and they changed. And all of a sudden you're hearing, I love them. I will bear with them longer. I will help them come to a sense of who they are. So it's always that dichotomy until it becomes pure love in the long run. That's what happens. Any other questions? No questions? Well, hey, I'm done a little early. No, I'm right on time. So if you have no other questions, but go back and read these things for yourself. Study them, because I think what you will learn from them will teach you much about yourself and teach you about Rahab didn't keep herself in the old place. She didn't keep herself in what she had done. That was no longer her understanding of who she was. She came and she embraced the way of God so fully that it consumed everything in her. Okay. All right, well, if there are no more questions, I hope you have enjoyed this series on the women of the Bible, and hope you have a good night tonight. And we'll turn it over to you.